Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to all. Um, Welcome to my mum. I was going to say especially, but we also have travelers from Scotland and travelers from England at this shiur today, and of course our local Yerushalmis. It's good to have you all. We are dealing with a bit of a massive topic today, so strap in. We are dealing with the topic of Yemot HaMashiach, the Messianic age, the Messianic era, and trying to get some sort of understanding as to what that is, what does that mean, what might that feel like, what might that look like in such a time. So I want to open by asking you a question, and that question is, we have my wife grew up in South Africa. So in South Africa, when they use these terms, they always use the Hebrew terms. Like they don't really say God so much, they say Hashem. They don't say the Messiah, they say Mashiach, and maybe that's normal in a lot of places. In the UK, for some reason, I don't know if you had this experience, but like we grew up saying the English version of words, the God and Messiah and things like that. So anyway, but like when my wife hears hears someone talk about Messiah, she's like, that's weird. It's like feels like a different. Actually, funny, it's the night that we're studying on. That feels like a different religion. But the question is, so what indeed, we have a Messiah. There's other religions which have a Messiah. Let's call it Christianity, but there's actually others as well. Interestingly enough, I had a weirdly positive relationship with a Muslim group in Scotland called the Ahmadiyyan Muslim community. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're a group of Muslims who also have a Messiah who lived like 100 years ago, and they're like super persecuted by other Muslims because of what's that?
It's Moses. He took us out of Egypt.
Well, let's think about that. So first, just before anything, this is more a quiz. This is a quiz, and then it's like an open question. Quiz is, what does the word Messiah or Mashiach mean? What is it? What is just literally just what does it mean?
Anointed.
Anointed. I mean, it's someone who's got oil poured over them, right? So there could be a few people. What's that?
All the kings.
So exactly. So there actually happens to be, by just strict definition, there have been a few people who have been the Mashiach over the time. Shaul, David. So I don't think Moshe would have been one of them.
No.
He was a Moshiach. He was a savior.
He was a savior.
He was a savior. But so these things are kind of going together.
In England,
Yeah.
where we come from
Yeah.
Scotland, but they still anoint the king.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
But in England, they anoint the king with oil.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. So I guess that happens.
Only happened once in
So my
the last 20 years.
So and a question to you is, so at the end of the day, we have a Messiah, they have a Messiah, right? And we have a Messianic era, which for us still to come. They have a Messianic era, which I guess to some extent has happened. I'm not trying not to get into the details of it. But what separates us from them? We all believe in Messiah. So what might be some of the key differences that you might think of or expect between our Messianic kind of era or development versus that of other religions? What any differences that you could think of?
Well, we're hoping Mashiach doesn't come. Maybe we're hoping that we mature to a level of Jewish consciousness that we don't need the Messiah.
So we may not agree with that 100%, but in a general sense, the words might be a little controversial in terms of what you're saying, but in general sense, we can agree that we want to be active in bringing about a better world. Messiah is associated with a better world, so we want to be active in bringing about a better world. That's certainly something which is true. I don't know. The truth is, I'm saying all this. I don't really know enough about like Christianity to really compare, but that's something which is certainly true about us, that we want to be a part of bringing about this better world. That's certainly true. Any other thoughts?
Judaism doesn't want all of the other nations to become Jewish.
Very
The
interesting.
other religions would say that's definitely the core.
Great points.
Maybe not all of them.
But great points. Yeah, religions in general, especially with the Messianic idea that, if you don't accept, the Messiah of a certain religion, you have nothing. Like you're out.
Except for Noahide laws.
So that's what we're going to say. So I'm saying according to the other religions, if you don't accept, the Messiah, like you're out. Whereas according to Judaism, there's actually a place for Jews and non-Jews in this eventual redemption. We actually talked a little bit about that, Noahide laws and a lot of other things in addition to Noahide laws. But that's interesting. There's a universal view which doesn't necessarily involve conversion. there's also some value to that as well. So that's also a really interesting point. Yeah, any other points that you're thinking of? Yeah, any thoughts?
No, I don't know
Yeah.
enough about the other religions to really make it.
That's the thing. So yeah, so we're so our aim is not to, even though I realized after the fact that this is apparently a significant night for other religions right now, 24th of December, in the evening. And I was gonna say, yeah. So but so again, it's accident. Plus also there's this practice. Apparently there's this thing that Americans have Chinese food on this night. You ever heard of that?
Tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Interesting because on
Or-
Christmas Day, because the Chinese food is
Was
the
open.
only one open.
Was it anyway? So that was like an accident. So this is also an accident, but maybe as we'll see in the show, there's something called Gila Yichud, where God's going to reveal that everything all happened for a reason. Maybe it all happened for a reason after all this accidental coincidence of the topic and the menu on this night. So let's get stuck in over here. We have our work cut out for us, which is what we tend to do around here. There you go. If you can take and pass. And what we basically want to do over here is, firstly, we'll remind ourselves of the overall course of history according to what we said, the Ramchal approach. There are different approaches out there, and we're not necessarily coming here to argue for approaches over other ones, but our main job is to take this approach, which is elucidated very well by the Ramchal, but is accepted by many. And when we do that, we will have a view of world history. And then what we'll try and do is zoom in to understand as much as we can about this Messianic era. And I'll say as much as we can, and I'll explain why I'm saying as much as we can soon. So without further ado, this is history. This is world history over here. Pretty simple. Oh, there you go. You've even got showing the camera. Okay, what does any of this mean? So basically, the Chazal say that this world, Olam Hazeh, this world will exist for 6,000 years. It's in the Gemara already. It's not a controversial source. This world, Olam Hazeh, will exist for 6,000 years. Right? So the world, simply speaking, the world as we know it, is existing for that amount of time. Then what it says is that there's going to be a 1,000-year transition period, which it calls Shabbos. It calls a Shabbat, which is like which means there's not necessarily so much. It's kind of a rest time in some senses, although it's actually very much a developing, processing time in other senses. And then after that, it's actually going to usher in the era of Olam Haba. So according to this approach, let's say in contrast to the Rambam and perhaps others, there's actually a progression from Olam Hazeh, this world, into Olam Haba, and it's our job to build, as kind of Jay was alluding to, it's our job to build one into the other. This world is defined as one which is imperfect. There's good and there's bad, and it's all very complicated. And we are meant to be building into a perfected world where God can be manifest and we can, bask in the rays of the light of God. So we're actually, as Jay said, we're meant to be active in this process. An additional point to what you said before was that there is also a role for God, even if we want to bring it about as much as possible, to do our part as much as possible. However, once the Chazal say what they do, that there is a cutoff point, there is only 6,000 years of existence of this world. That means that God, if we don't get there, then God is going to bring about all these developments by himself. And as we'll elaborate more on now, there's a bit more to it than that. It's not just God sort of like, wait, and then now it's going to come in out of nowhere. There's actually certain things that Hashem is actually doing all the way along the way in order to enable us to actually bring that whole thing back. So we're gonna discuss all this, but this is the very, very broad map of world history, past, present, and future. And just to highlight what we're going to be talking about today, so the period that we're going to be talking about, Yemot HaMashiach, is right here. It's somewhere at the end of the Olam Hazeh period. Meaning it's not after. This is going to be the kind of climax in many ways of Olam Hazeh, of this world, and then the process will continue as we discussed. Next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will discuss Olam Haba and what that part talks about. So here we've been discussing Olam Hazeh for a couple of weeks. We'll discuss hopefully tonight Yemot HaMashiach and then go from there.
What would happen? Our great grandchildren, 6,000 years, 6,000 years, sort of nothing. When the world changes a lot, computers, the world was a big change since the industrial area. The world changed. Fine, there's always going to be changes, but I mean, what if the world continues? Like what? Well, I mean, there's been loads of prophecies of the Mayan calendar this or the laboratory Rebbe that. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So there have been, it seems to be a favorite thing for rabbis over the years to do is to predict a date for the coming of the Mashiach. Right? So that I don't know for sure. I certainly know it's not advised, but there's a bunch of people who did but there's a bunch of people who did it, like pretty reputable people, and you have to understand. If I recall correctly, I think the Ramban is even one of them. It's not only wacky people who have done this. The Ramban, I believe he put a date, I think, for a date. But again, so yeah.
It's just really odd because isn't he the one that said we shouldn't think too much about it?
That's the Yeah, there's a lot to be said about this. Primarily, I think the statement you're talking about is the Rambam, Maimonides, as opposed to Nachmanides. But I'll just say, but that is a good point. Even still, I don't think we are in this particular aspect offending the Rambam, Maimonides so much because we've had, as I say, I think this is our 20th year, I think. We're only talking about this for like 2 shiurim, so like it's not. I don't think it's called talking about it too much to gain a basic understanding of what we're talking about. But it is a good point to bring up. So what if indeed? So we kind of have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Meaning, at this stage, there's no reason to believe that things will not change at 6,000, or at least it has to be actually even some time before, which we'll talk about, because there's a bunch of things which have to happen in Yemot HaMashiach before we get 6,000. And if we're in 5, 7, 8, 6 now, then it's like something right around the corner is like really meant to happen. That, give or take, I'm not telling you it's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know exactly when, but at some point before the 6,000, something's got to happen. If it doesn't happen, it would be a much bigger refutation than anything which has been so far, because anything which has been so far, okay, maybe this Rishon or whatever said something, but Chazal, it's explicit in the Gemara that it's going to be 6,000. So then we would be in big trouble. That, as far as
you said it. You don't want to say that it's going to be tomorrow. Is that not one of the animamim?
You want to believe such a thing, right? I'm just trying to, believe versus prediction. I'm not trying to tell you that it is going to be, but certainly it's something which could come about any day. Yeah.
Is it possible to cross that boundary into the time of Mashiach without even realizing it?
Possibly. Let's hold that. I think that's a really important question. So let's hold that question and learn the sources and see what you think about that question, because I think it could be the very date is out. Yeah.
Isn't it? I don't know if it's Rambam or some. I think one of the commentators says that like when Mashiach comes, then I think that I pray if I'm wrong, I must look at between whether or not it's gonna like look completely different or whether or not it's gonna look like life today, but just in the time of Mashiach. Yeah. But like life as we know it will sort of continue.
Yeah.
But necessarily know that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. So even the so I think the Rambam, Maimonides, is much, again, I don't know enough about his perspective, but I think he's much more aligned with the idea that it's going to be a much more minimal change than what we'll describe today. However, number one, what the Rambam still does say, because again, it's explicit in Chazal, you can't get around certain things in Chazal. So Chazal say that there's going to be no more persecution of Klal Yisrael by Umut Olam, that there's not going to be anti-Semitism and stuff like that anymore. So that would be quite remarkable, right? That you would notice that difference. However, he does talk, nature is not going to change and stuff like that. However, saying all that, we could possibly by the end of this year, I'm very excited to hopefully quote Rav Kook, like in an actual source, which I don't know if we've done that. We've quoted him outside, but we've actually read something. But once we read that, it could be, maybe we'll find that there may not be so much difference between those approaches after all. So let's have a look. Okay, so what have we said so far? There's a general map of history. We are closing in on the end of the 6,000 years of Olam Hazeh, which means that Yemot HaMashiach is going to really have to happen pretty much any time now. What will it look like? So I just say there's certain elements of debate, but one thing which I think everyone can agree on is that we don't 100% know. How do I know we don't 100% know? Because there's number one, there's a lot of gaps in the sources. Well, firstly, I'm not just saying that I don't 100% know. That's obvious, right? That's very obvious that I don't know, right? But even those who know, meaning even if you actually were to peruse all the relevant sources, you would still find gaps, things which are unclear, and you find contradictions. You find that sometimes it said it's going to be like this, and then people say it's going to be like this. even in, again, Chazal, like sources which we're kind of meant to hold of. So part of the idea is that there's different ways that it could look. It's not been solidified yet, because especially as Jay was talking about, we want to have a role in bringing that about. It's not just something which has nothing to do with us. If that's the case, then the way that it's going to look can vary depending on how exactly we get there, when exactly we get there. So that's part of the reason why there's not a full picture of what it's going to be like, is because it's not 100% determined yet. However, what we're going to focus on today are the aspects which are kind of like thematic. So the themes we can be clear on, even if we can't be clear on this exact event and this exact date, but we can be clear on certain themes of certain changes which are likely to occur. And then at least get a bigger picture of what it might look like, what it might feel like. So with that, let's check out this first source over here. So I thought a fun way to do it is we could look at a couple of sources from the prophets themselves and see what is the Ramchal's like interpretation version of that. So first theme that we want to talk about is the idea of eradication of evil. So you see, let's have a look at this pasuk from Yeshaya. It says, Bila hamavet lanetzach. Death will be swallowed up forever. Death will disappear forever. And God will wipe away the tears from every face. What we're seeing over here is a remarkable change. That in the future, there's going to be some remarkable change where death, in the same way, is not going to exist, and pain, in the same way, is not going to exist. It's a very beautiful line. It's a very moving line, honestly. Is actually, I don't know if anyone's into Zusha, is a band called Zusha, and like they came out with like a version of this, made a song like kind of like right after October 7th. It was a very moving thing. That God will wipe away the tears from all the faces. What is the Ramchal's take on what that might mean for Yemot HaMashiach, what that might look like, different implications? So it says as follows: Sof davar, at the end, mikoach shlemuto, from the God's abilities of perfection, i.e., God's character of being perfect and being complete, Yader be'emet hachisaron, is going to wipe away any idea of lack and deficiency. V'yishar hakol metukan b'koach memshelet tuvo asholet levado, and that everything is going to be left fixed, repaired, perfected, all from God's abilities of imposing His goodness on the unilaterally imposing His goodness on the world. So that's this idea that what we're calling bitul hara, that God is going to eradicate evil, which in these terms we're going to say chisaron, even any just idea of lack and deficiency. So that's going to be something which is associated with evil. We'll even read a little bit more of this. So it says Chazal Amru. So he quotes Chazal. It says Shanim. Shanim Asher Tomar Ein Li Bahem Chayfetz. That part is actually a quote from Kohelet, but then Chazal are going to say something next. So there's going to be years where you're going to say Ein Li Bahem Chayfetz. I don't have any desire in them. So what does that mean? There's going to be years where you don't have any desire in them. So Elu, Chazal say Elu Yemot HaMashiach. That's a reference to the Messianic age. She'ein bahem lo zchut v'lo chova. It's not going to be a time of merit. It's not going to be a time of punishment or negative implications. What does that mean? So this is the Ramchal now speaking. Zeh pashut ki ka'asher yitayir adam yetzer hara. Once the human being has been purified from the yetzer hara, so hine ein avodato ela b'koach muchrach. Then what we're going to be doing is not because of bechira anymore. It's not because of it's hard. I struggle. There's good. There's bad. I don't know what to do. The way that we're going to act is going to be natural. The goodness which is going to come out of us is going to be natural. So basically, what has he just said over here? That what's going to happen as part of Yemot HaMashiach is something called bitul hara. That evil is going to be eradicated from the world. What does that mean? So the essence of the word evil, ra, the etymology comes from there's a pasuk in Tanakh, Toroim v'shevet barzel, to break them with a staff of iron, which basically the ra means brokenness. That's really what evil means. The word ra in and of itself means brokenness. So evil, the way we translate it as that, is like the moral version of the moral translation of brokenness. But there's other manifestations of brokenness as well. One, for example, is illness. One is suffering. The idea, all of these things are versions of brokenness which exist in the world because God is still in the era of holding back, and he's not yet giving all of his goodness to the world. He's holding back a little bit for the purposes of Olam Hazeh, and so that we have a job of Tikkun Olam and Bechira to make those choices. And coming with that is also the Yetzer Hara, meaning even the evil inside us, the evil which is one of the voices inside us, is a version of brokenness. Once Hashem comes and imposes his goodness on the world, then no more evil, no more illness, no more suffering, and for that matter, also no more Yetzer Hara. That's part of the package of evil. I'll come to you in just a second. That's part of the package of evil, and what that means is basically our work of this Olam Hazeh period of Bechira and choosing. So what that's going to mean is that our work is done. We actually completed that era of history of the struggle, and now it's time for purity. So it seems like what he's saying is that we might still be doing stuff in this time, but it'll be natural. It won't be a struggle. It'll be natural at that stage. What do you think about this?
My question is, what separates us from animals at that point? We no longer have, it makes it sound like we don't have big choice. Because part of what makes us human is the fact that we get more out.
That's a great point. That's a great point. That is part of what makes us human. It's not the idea of free choice in the moral, sense is something which makes us human, both unique from animals on the one hand, who don't have free choice in the realm of morality, but also from angels on the other hand. Angels don't necessarily have free choice. They're always doing, whatever Hashem tells them, basically. So we are in the middle of those two and having that struggle, and that's our reality in Olam Hazeh. There is actually, it's an interesting question. I think possibly the answer is, but not 100%. Possibly the answer is that there's more to our difference from animals than just free choice. That is part of it, and it's a very significant part of it. But if you think of the background to free choice, what is behind the scenes is that we have a physical body. We have, which is like kind of similar to them. We have physicality, but we also have a neshama. We also have a soul, which comes from the heavens. And we are this composite entity of heaven and earth, of spirituality and physicality put together. And in that sense, we still maintain that uniqueness. We still are different from animals in the sense that they also have a version of spirituality, but not quite the same as human beings. And we're still unique from angels because they basically only have the spirituality. So still what it means to be a human, to be that unique creation, which is made up of both physicality and spirituality in kind of significant measure. So that would still give us our uniqueness. But I'm not 100%, but that's what I'm thinking about that issue. So this is part of what we're seeing. So all the things, basically, there's other things in Yeshaya about, the wolf will lie down with the lamb, and and also other things about that nation will not hold up sword against nation. All this stuff. In other words, utopia, like the classic view of utopia, with no more evil, no more pain, no more suffering. So that's part of what's going to be this Yemot HaMashiach period. So it'll relate also to what we brought up. What we discussed a bit from the Rambam of there won't be any more persecution of Jews, and the nations of the world won't be relating to us in that way. But that's like a taste of a bigger theme, which is there isn't going to be evil anymore. So that's theme number one. That's theme number one of Yemot HaMashiach. Any other points or questions at that stage?
I just asked for what you said. Do animals choose between bad and good?
Yeah,
some clearly do.
It's a good question. The simple answer is at least not normally, meaning animals do have something called choice. They certainly choose. I'm always cheeky. It's like they can choose which flavor of ice cream. That's not what we really call the significant version of free choice. That's an insignificant. It's free choice. No one is forcing them to pick strawberry over vanilla. No one's forcing them. It's a choice. Maybe tomorrow they'll pick a different one. But it's not the significant free will, which is in the realm of morality, and there's an internal struggle. What's the right thing to do in this situation? People who know animals better would almost definitely argue. I feel people who like animals usually like have a more prominent like view. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I was thinking to put on that. I have a dog, and
Yeah.
he will like he will occasionally grab one of my socks and take it to his bed. Yeah, but he has the ability to have discipline in the sense that he knows he's not allowed to, and he gets gently scolded when he does. But then we always laugh because he's so cute. But but the moral, the sort of the moral that we have in place at home, as in what he's allowed to do and isn't, is something that has to be put in place. As in, he doesn't have a moral compass in that same sense, I think. Although there are some more like super core levels at which he does, because when he hears squeaky toys, he thinks it's like another animal hurting, and he wants to save it. But I think that the moral, the ethics have to be placed there, either by the owner, or if it's in terms of what you do in a pack of other dogs, the morals get put in place in that you get slapped if you overstep.
Yeah, interesting. I hear. Okay, I'm glad to hear.
He's adopting your behaviors. He's
obeying my rules, and if those rules we can think of them as ethics or moral, then those have to be imposed for him to know that
this is the way the game is being played.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So
I asked about that because of what you said, and I was trying to see then there is a difference.
Yeah, so there for sure is going to be a difference, but this would be to get into the exact nitty-gritty of what the difference is. I think it was very interesting. Like, it's a very interesting thing. So let's have a little look at the next theme. So this theme number one is eradication of evil, what they call bittul hara. The what's it called? They learn kashrus in the kollel over here. So they talk about bittul, when something is nullified, it's just it's existed and it no longer exists. So that's the idea of what's going to happen to evil. Now, how about revelation of God? So first, let's look at Zechariah. It says as follows: Vaya, and this is a passage we're quite familiar with. Vaya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. God will be king over the whole earth. Vayomahu yiyeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. On that day, in the future, in that day, God will be one and His name will be one. So what that seems to be implying is that there's, as of now, at least when Zechariah is writing, and seemingly to a large extent as of now, so God's name is not one. There's not a full manifestation of God's oneness in the world as we stand here today. However, there will be a time where that actually will be manifest, and so let's look at what the Ramchal does with that. He says, "V'hinei b'yom hadin hagadol." On the great day of judgment, which we'll elaborate on more, but that's going to be part of the Messianic era process. So what's going to happen on that day? Yifros ha'adon baruch hu et hasimla la'inei kol yitzur. That God is going to lay out the sheet in front of the eyes of all. Hey, welcome. He's going to lay out the sheet in front of the eyes of all creations. Mikol ma shena'aseh miyom baro elakim adam al haaretz, and he's going to explain everything which happened from the day that he created man on earth ad hayom hahu, until that very day. So there's going to be this idea of, so one thing is the idea of that there's going to be this oneness of God, this revelation of God. What does that, or at least one of the main things, what does that mean? What that's going to actually mean is basically we're going to get a lesson in understanding all of history, every single thing which happens over the course of all of history to the world, in your life, every single thing, there is a reason. Every single thing, somehow Hashem arranged it that it was going to lead somehow in a positive direction. Somehow it's going to take you one step closer to your personal destiny. Somehow it's going to take the world one step closer to its global destiny. Every single thing that happens is going to be like that. Sometimes now, if you're very lucky, you get a taste of such a thing. But most of the reality in this day and age is not like that. The world is very confusing. Without trying to drop big names of terrible events in history, it's not very easy to see what could have been the good in such a thing. And it's
the way the good could come about.
Right, and that is that as well, and that it was that specifically that was the way that it was meant to be. However, so this is not something we have access to now. In that sense, we don't really have access to God's oneness in a full sense, because this is God's oneness, God's hand in all of history, every single one of the trillion events in history. So that's part of God's oneness, His unity in all of the world over all of history.
We call that oneness, don't we call that
Yeah.
divine providence?
So that's that's the category of things is divine providence or hashgacha pratit or klalit, depending on how you call it, but certainly hashgacha. But the nature of that hashgacha is oneness. So meaning it's like you could have an idea. There's something called hashgacha. Let's say you had a God who dipped in every now and again. So that would still be called hashgacha. It would be called God's management of the world, but it would be a non-comprehensive. It'd be like a partial management of the world. But the idea that it's comprehensive, that it's one. So that's what we call Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad, actually. It's very interesting, which makes it something to think about in the Shema, actually interesting. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one. So the part of the Kavanahs of the Shema, that Hashem's controlling every single thing. He's involved in every single thing. So this is not something that we have access to at the moment, but in the future, in the Yemot HaMashiach, that is something which God is going to actually reveal to us. And finally, we're going to, all that trauma, all the terrible things, he's going to explain how it wove one unbelievable tapestry, which led ultimately to the better worlds that we are talking about.
That's our emunah.
That's indeed, that's the emunah. So
it's not revealed that Hashem's one, but it is the state of affairs that Hashem is.
Correct. Yeah, that's why I was using the word manifestation, because you could argue it's revealed in the sense of, in my personal psychology, this is hidden from me, or in my mind. Let's say this is maybe a fact, but it's hidden from me. It's not something I have access to. But also, the idea of manifestation, that it's the reality is going to be like that. Things are going to be clear. The prophets also say Mala Haaretz Deah, that the world is going to be filled with the knowledge of God. What might that look? Okay, knowledge of God. What might that look like? The knowledge of God's infinite abilities through every single event in history, which is something which there's obviously endless depth to as well, of course, because the orchestrator is someone who is infinite, right? So it's going to be endless depth of understanding. Ultimately at that stage, at the moment, it's pain and suffering. Then it's going to be something of beauty, and we're going to be able to actually appreciate that. And that probably, by the way, goes back to the point, the pasuk in Yeshaya of Mach Hashem Dima Me Al Kol Panim, that God is going to wipe away the tears from all the faces, and that thing which can be sometimes trauma that we've had individually, collectively. Hashem is going to wipe away those tears, and we're not going to have the tears about that anymore, because we're going to be able at that time. Now we don't have access to this, but at that time we're going to be able to see how that too helped towards the individual and the collective destinies.
Those of us with great emunah are already there. You're just catching up to them.
So there's So there's a little bit to be said about that, and that's why the Shema is something that we say every day. It's something that one should believe, that God is one and He's in everything. However, there is a reason that you cover your eyes when you say the Shema, because you can't honestly look at the world and genuinely say Hashem is one, because that's not your experience of the world. That is a fact, but you can't testify honestly whilst looking at all the complexity and the challenges which are going on in the world. You can't honestly testify to that fact. You can believe it, which is why we say it, and you have to have kavanah, but you can't quite testify to that. It appears, it kind of implies that maybe in the future, maybe we will say Shema with open eyes. It sounds, I haven't seen a source for that, but at least metaphorically, if we could say such a thing, maybe even literally, I'm not sure. So this is a second big theme. So these are really the two big themes. One is the idea of bitul hara, that there's going to be no more evil and all of the pain and suffering which goes along with that. Also, that there's going to be a revelation of God, and there's going to be the knowledge and understanding of all of history and what led up to that ultimate redemptive moment. Now, one of the things that we have alluded to a couple of times already in different ways is this idea of Yom HaDin HaGadol, that there's going to be some kind of judgment thing going on in that time as well. So what is that? What is that all about? You're just in time for the Yom HaDin HaGadol judgment day. So take a look at this story that they tell in the Gemara, which is used as an analogy for this Yom HaDin HaGadol. It says as follows: Shnei shomrim echad chiger ve'echad I've missed out a word over there, but it's meant to be Iver. So there were two people whose job it was to guard a field. One of them was physically disabled, and one was meaning like chiger, like he had some kind of limp or something like that. Ve'echad, it could mean also he just had legs, one or more, which are not working, is whatever the definition of chiger. And then ve'echad ivers, one was blind. So these two, so this is, yeah, all right. So these two people were hired as workers to guard a field which had, I think, fruit on it. So I skipped the middle bit just for the size of I like to get things on one sheet of paper. So, but basically what happens is that these people are a bit kind of troublemakers. So one of them can't see and one of them can't walk, basically, is the idea. So the one who can see but can't walk says, wow, I see really nice fruits over there. Let's go and take it for ourselves. But I'm going to need your help because I can't walk. So basically, so the other one said, okay, it sounds nice. I can't see it, but I'll trust you. So they team up, and the one who can't walk goes on the shoulders of the one who can. So he's the eyes, and the other one's the legs, as it were. And then they go together and they steal the thing. Now the story continues. Le'amim ba bal pardes. Now, then the boss comes. Later on, the boss comes, the person who's in charge of the field. Amar lahen, bikurat, naot, heichan. Where are these lovely fruits? What happened to them? So Amar lachiger, so the one who can't walk, says, Klum yeshli reglaim lahalech behen. Well, it can't have anything to do with me because I don't have the ability to walk. So it was over there, nothing to do with me. And then, of course, Amar lo Suma, or sorry, not Iver, Suma, that's Aramaic word. The Suma, the blind person says, Klum yeshli einaim lirot. What would I want to? I can't even see the thing that you're claiming that I've stolen. So what? So Ma'asa. So what did the what's it called? The boss do. So obviously it's a bit obvious what's happened, but each one is kind of like trying to absolve themselves of responsibility, which is something that we all do, by the way. It wasn't me because of this, wasn't me because of this. Okay, but so what's he do? It's very clever. He says here kiv chiger al gabe suma. So he puts the one who can't walk on top of the one who can't see, and he judges them as one. So the Gemara says, it's an analogy for the body and the soul. So which in a negative manifestation. So the soul can see, but it can't walk. Meaning the soul is something which has the vision, but it is not physical. So it can't really do anything in the way. It can't do an avera. The soul can't do an avera. It's just a spiritual entity. The body can walk. It can move you around the world. It can do stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have the vision to know what to do, what not to do. So basically, it says that this is what Hashem is going to do at the end. So you have the body and soul. When death, the idea of death is a separation of body and soul. Body and soul were together. Then in death, they go to different places. We'll talk about this too. But in short, the soul goes up and the body goes down. So how can you judge body or soul? Because neither of them had the ability to do the crime, as it were, by themselves. So it says that basically this is going to be Tchiyat HaMetim. There's going to be something called the revival of the dead, and the body and souls are going to come back together. And then there's going to be something called Yom HaDin HaGadol, where the judgment is going to occur together. Because you can't judge each one by itself, because it's true, each one by itself didn't do the job. Only them together did the job. Now, of course, this is not only related to negative things, just happens to be for some reason the Gemara uses that negative analogy to talk about this, but this is for the positive and the negative. And so there's basically what there's going to be also in Yemot HaMashiach is something called Tchiyat HaMetim, the revival of the dead, body and soul coming back together, and they're going to have this Yom HaDin HaGadol, which is this judgment. What is judgment all about? So one of the things that we've said is we have now passed the era of free will. That work of free will is done. Everyone has had their chance to make actions in the world. Good actions, maybe they did good, maybe they did some things which are not good, but they have a totality of the actions that they did in this world. And what the actions that they did in this world are going to determine what they need for the next stage, because what's going to happen in the next stage is going to be getting ready for Olam Haba. So the state that you are, how you've done, is going to determine what work you need in order to get ready for this ultimate rewards of Olam Haba. So what happens is God brings everyone back to life. The body and the soul together. Is going to be a judgment, and once all the free will is said and done, so there's going to be like a solidification of everyone's legacy in the world, And then that is gonna determine what you need in order to enter that next stage of transition in order to become ready for Olam Haba. So it's a pretty huge thing. Yeah.
I know I've brought this up before, and it's about the soul, and the soul's going back to the bodies.
Yeah.
Because the souls that a lot of people get, if not everybody, are not new souls. So, so there've been saved souls in a number of bodies.
Yeah.
And am I right in thinking that they're split then?
Yeah, there's something to be said about that. I don't know the full answer to the question you're asking. Basically, it gets into the idea of Gilgulim, of reincarnation, and that there's such a thing that a soul can have multiple lifetimes in multiple bodies, meaning that you can have a soul and they say, oh, like I don't know these things very well, but I'm pretty sure they say who are big reincarnations, like that people talk about. I think like I heard a good one, Moshe and Rebbe Kiva, maybe something about that. I don't know. Take that with a pinch of salt. I don't really know enough, really very much about this stuff. Let's say, for example, Moshe and Rebbe Kiva was a Gilgul of Moshe. Let's say it was a reincarnation of Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's say that if that was true, then who's going to come back? Moshe is going to come back, or Rebbe Kiva is going to come back, because it's one soul for two bodies. So the short answer is I don't know the answer to the question. There is such a thing as splitting up of souls. That's for sure true, because there's only really 600,000 Jewish souls. So in as much as there's how many million Jews are we at today? I don't know, 15, let's call it 15 roughly. So 600,000 souls into 15 million people. That means that each soul can be subdivided, and there are different parts of the souls. So in the olden days, they used to have kind of one soul per body, but now we have it's split up into different ones. So that's something which is true. I don't know whether that helps us with the answer to the question, because I don't know is basically the answer. I would love to try and find out. Let me know if you find out anything more about it.
Cats in the old city of thieves.
What's it again?
I've heard cats in the old.
So there is such a thing. Again, this stuff is beyond my pay grade, but there are like pretty reputable sources about reincarnation, even into animals, even into inanimate objects, even into like the Chofetz Chaim talks about this. Not like controversial sources. Like Chofetz Chaim talks about this stuff. I don't understand it. I never really went into it, but there are things like this.
Where is that notion from that there are only 600,000 souls?
I'm not sure. It's based on the number which came out of Egypt. I'm not sure where that is, where the explicit source which says like that's it, but that is the number that came out of Egypt. So that was kind of like the prototype of the Jewish people.
It says that we're all there at Hasing.
Good. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the answer.
So those are the original souls.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that I don't know. It doesn't mean that there maybe weren't reincarnations before the time. I'm not sure, but in terms of whole souls, as it were, that would have been the time in history when you had that.
So we're only about a 25th or something.
Something like that.
Each of us only has.
So it makes you think how special these people were, eh? These are the people who received the Torah, so they must have been pretty special. They had that first-hand experience of God. Yeah, it's interesting, eh? So let's with the last couple of minutes, I want to have a little look at one source. So just to recap what we've seen, we've talked about this era of history, which is kind of like the end of Olam Hazeh period. What does that entail? That entails bitul hara, that there's going to be no more evil, and no more yetzer hara, and no more suffering, etc., etc. We've also talked about Gilui Yichud, that the oneness of God is going to be revealed, which is also going to give us that history lesson of all the things which happened over time and what those really meant and what those were really achieving. And we also talked about Yom HaDin HaGadol, which sounds very scary, like the Great Judgment Day sounds like things that other religions talk about. That we talk about that too. But it's something which is, in as much as you realize that all judgment is really for the bigger purpose of tikkun, that any judgment is to know what you need in order to help you to the next stage. So that's really what's happening with Yom HaDin HaGadol, is to bring body and soul back together once again and determine what they're going to need in order to make that transition into Olam Haba. And so finally, let's have a little look at this source, which is completely off to the sides, but I'm desperate to learn it together with you. This deserves much, much more time, but let's try and look at it together. So this is the Rav Kook in Pinkasei Araya. So this is like, he sometimes, there is books, and he sometimes just wrote random things. It's like his little notebooks. So they collect, Hashem, whoever does this stuff, collected a lot of his writings from his notebooks. This is one of the things which he says. It's a much bigger piece. We're just extracting something. He says, Zivchei Bali Chaim, Yitzamu Me'achilat Reshut Vadai. In the future, animal slaughter is for sure going to be reduced, certainly from the perspective of Achilat Reshut, meaning your own meaning take a walk, meaning like your own personal eating choice, in contrast to korbanot. He's going to talk about korbanot soon. But for sure, in terms of just people eating meat, in South Africa, just because, right? That is for sure going to be going out the door in the future times. That's what he says. Amazing. Says Kia Katuv Omen, Ki ta'avat nafshecha le'echol basar. Because in the Torah, when it talks about eating meat for non-sacrificial purposes, it calls it, it calls it basar taiva. It calls it meat of desire or lust almost. He says, and so that's why you eat meat, because that's your reality. It says, we just said that that what's going to happen is this whole shlemut thing, that there's going to be a completion, there's going to be no more evil in the world, there's going to be a revelation of God and spirituality. If so, why would you want to eat? You won't want to eat meat. You just won't want it because it comes from taiva, which is something which has a bit of a negative tinge to it. So why would you want to eat meat? I'll just add in now, he has not said ever, I'm just saying, he didn't say you must be vegetarian now, because he's saying that in as much as this world, this stage of history, there's something called taiva. There's just as kind of Yoni was talking about before, it's just the reality, the state of affairs is we don't have a nefesh shlema at the moment. It's not quite perfect. So he didn't necessarily prescribe this now, but he's saying in the future, once the shlemut comes in, once the completion comes in. So he said for sure that at least the kind of voluntary meat eating is going to go away. Yeah, sure.
I mean, eating in general, like people have a craving for fruit too.
So yeah, so that we'll get to Bezrat Hashem in the next year in terms of Olam Haba. So in Olam Haba, the Gemara explicitly says there's no more eating. So at that stage, even that kind of eating, simply speaking, will not exist. Right. Well, that's the thing. It's like, oh, you really want Mashiach? You have to. Anyway, but what does that mean? We'll come to that in a minute. But so it seems like in the Yemot HaMashiach, we're not quite there yet. Or like all eating, interestingly enough, is going to go away. So that's, you see, Yemot HaMashiach is a bit of an interesting phase. It's a perfected version of this world, but it's still, and you don't have like a Yetzer Hara, but you still kind of exist as a human being. You haven't gone through that whole transition 1,000 years in order to become almost angelic. So it's an interesting point that you're bringing up. It seems like there's still going to be some needs to eat, but not necessarily needs to eat meat, interestingly enough. Yesh ladun in terms of donuts. What do you think about that? Is that only from Taiva or not? So he says, and perhaps in the future, in a later stage, maybe the following is going to happen. Oh, Shel Sanhedrin as Yimatze Lanachon. Sanhedrin is going to be a Sanhedrin. It's going to be a Beit HaMikdash. So as he's alluding to, there's going to be korbanos in the time to come. There's going to be sacrifices, but maybe there's going to be some footnotes on that. So there's going to Sanhedrin. Maybe they're going to see fit. That they have the ability to tell you not to do stuff in the Torah. For example, blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah. That the sages at the time when we had a Sanhedrin, they said don't blow. Sorry, meaning on Shabbos, right? So not in general. In general, we do blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but if it falls on Shabbat, they were concerned that may lead to some kind of chilul Shabbat. That was something they didn't want to take the risk of. So they said we just don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. They can't say violate something actively, but they can say be passive. So he says maybe what's going to happen is maybe in the future they're going to say in terms of the bringing the meat korbanot. Maybe they're going to say be passive. Liftor me korbanot achova shel min achai. Maybe they're going to say that you don't have to bring those the animal sacrifices anymore. So so he talks about that. So he even says mi korbanot achova, even the obligatory ones. So what does he say? So the Gemara says that I think that in the future all the korbanos will go away apart from the korban tamids. But he has an interesting take, and the Tamid has keves echad ben baboker, keves echad ben arbaim. It's got sheep in it. But he said his interesting take on that. He says maybe the way that you're not going to read that is it also has lechem with it. It also has bread. So maybe the reason it's not going to go away is because it has bread, and you're going to continue to bring the bread components of it. That's an interesting thing. So what are we trying to get at here? Is a massive topic. What we're trying to get at is the idea that there's something called stages, something called gradual development. And that's when you see there are explicit sources in Chazal which say that there is going to be a Beis HaMikdash. There are going to be animal korbanot in the future. So what does he do with those sources? So the idea is that there's going to be a development. That even though we've just been talking about Yemot HaMashiach, there's going to be this new era which is going to come in, which is going to have new characteristics. However, it might not be all at once. It may be stages where, first of all, we're going to start to move towards that shlemut. And then maybe at some point over there, we're going to stop having that kind of taiva. And then maybe at some point, to the extent that maybe we'll bring all the animal sacrifices that we need to bring, and maybe that tikkun will be done. And our work will be done there too. And then maybe they'll become an even more refined stage. So the main thing I'm trying to take away from this massive topic, the main thing I'm trying to take away is that kind of like comes back to your question from the start, is, will you notice the difference? So in a general sense, for sure, there's going to be significant differences according to the Ramchal, and seemingly a lot of these prophecies, there's going to be significant differences between the way that we live today and Yemot HaMashiach. However, number one, as we said before, not everything is 100% certain. And number two, that it seems to be there's going to be this idea of gradual development. So where does that leave us today? So I don't know. Have we started this process? Have we not started this process? So that's up to you to think about. So I just want to let me call this year there. I have time for questions, of course, but I just want to make sure to stop the recording. All that. Cheers.